Welcome along to the Prevention is the New Cure podcast. We are here again discussing all things NHS and health related with a political twist. I'm Steve Brine. I represent Winchester in Hampshire. Currently chair the Health and Social Care Select Committee in the House of Commons.
Good morning. I'm Helen Stokes-Lampard. I'm a frontline general practitioner in the Midlands. I'm chair of the Academy of Medical Royal Colleges and chair of the National Academy for Social Prescribing. It's great to be here.
Great. So this is episode 3, believe it or not, Helen. Last time we had the brilliant Dame Callie Palmer, your fellow Dame, on talking all things cancer special. And do you know what? It was our best listened to pod yet. In fact, we had almost double the number of listeners that we had previously. So that's fantastic. And thanks again to Callie for coming on.
Yeah, she was great. It was really good fun. And it was good to have a focus on such an important topic that touches everybody's lives. I mean, you know, as a GP on a daily basis, patients coming through the door, one of the things in my mind is, could this be cancer? And seeing it through her eyes from sort of national director point of view was really helpful. And I hope it raised a bit of awareness. And it was good fun. Thanks.
She was really good fun, wasn't she? So we've had great feedback from that, really good DMs on Twitter and emails from people with suggesting ideas that we might talk about and all that. So it's really great. So thanks so much. You know, there's no point in us doing a pod if you don't listen to it. It seems to have found its niche, and we're really grateful. Please remember to click the like button on your platform, your podcast platform of choice. And apparently that helps us. I don't know how, but apparently it does. Anyway, where are we going to start this week then, H?
I'm afraid we better talk about industrial action, Steve, much as I don't want to. But end of last week, we heard that the junior doctors in England have set out dates for their next set of industrial action. So that's a 4-day walkout from Tuesday, the 11th of April. Now, that's a step up from their 3-day action from a few weeks ago. Now, 3 weeks ago in their 3-day action, that led to the cancellation or postponement of 175,000 procedures, operations, appointments or tests across the NHS in England. 4 days will obviously have a much greater impact. And what you need to clock is the timing of this. It'll happen after the 4-day bank holiday weekend for Easter and run into the following weekend. So effectively, you'll have 10 days where the NHS in England is not firing on all cylinders. And that is of grave concern to lots of people. And so there's an awful lot of work going on behind the scenes. And last night, the Academy of Medical Royal Colleges, along with a lot of other significant medical and health bodies, has urged all the parties to get to the negotiation table and for everybody to enter with a spirit of collaboration, as being prepared to be flexible. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what negotiations are all about.
Jeepers, that is a worry, isn't it? So we had this week in Parliament, we had something called the Liaison Committee. So all the chairs of the select committees come together. It's called the Liaison Committee. And that basically asks questions to one person only, and that's the Prime Minister. And I was there. It was my turn this time to ask questions. And I asked about where we are with COVID catch-up, you know, the elective catch-up. And, you know, we had, some 7 million people on the waiting list, people coming in all the time, even though we're getting through some of the older backlogs. And I think, you know, he said we've all but eliminated the 2-year waits, whoopee. You know, by April, the plan was to eliminate the 18-month waits, and then we move on from there. I think the IFS said that we were, you know, within touching distance of, by April, which, let's face it, is this weekend, getting to eliminate those waits. But as I asked Prime Minister, you know, how worried would he be that this industrial action is merely setting that back? And from what you've said about the number of cancellations, it can only be doing that, can't it? Then it adds to the workload challenge that the JDs, the junior doctors, feel.
Absolutely. I mean, so we think about it in sort of 2 big ways when we look at the NHS. There's the urgent care, that's the on-the-day stuff, and there's the planned care. So you inevitably suspend or postpone your planned care, and that's where the waiting lists come in, to free you up to focus on the urgent stuff that has to be done today. So the knock-on effect takes weeks and months to work through. So everyone will pull together, you know, the consultants, the GPs, the other healthcare professionals throughout the NHS will pull together to keep patients safe on the individual days of the action. But it's the subsequent weeks and months where the backlog will have just got greater, where the problems will really be felt. I mean, we hope that we'll be able to cope and mitigate on the days. Now, there's a system in place where if the NHS is really falling over on its knees, there are emergency buttons effectively that can be pushed to get doctors back off the picket line and in. And indeed, the nurses did that when, you know, specific situations happened in individual hospitals. But you know, this is to take industrial action on this scale is a measure of just how angry frustrated and upset junior doctors are. And of course, this is a ripple through the system. And we're seeing it nationally with the impact on so many services and so many people feeling discontent at the moment. But the junior doctors have got a particular, very strong claim.
So you must liaise with them. I mean, you talk with them as a fellow clinician. So let's unpack this. So that anger, that unhappiness is not all about money, is it?
No, I mean, the juniors have got a very strong specific query about money because their pay has fallen behind over a period of about 14 years, and they're now about 35% behind where they would have been had the trajectory of then continued. Now,
hence that's their 35% ask.
Specific,
yeah, I get that. Yeah.
But of course, the anger and frustration is so much greater. We've got a workforce that is understaffed. We've got challenges in the NHS with technology. We've got challenges with infrastructure. And I think there's a big thing about feeling valued for individuals. Now, ironically, doctors are some of the most loved and trusted individuals in society as a profession, but that has eroded over time. And the systems that used to wrap around and look after people working crazy hours and taking huge responsible decisions have also been eroded. So this, for me, there's something really important about valuing people better, looking after people, so people who are doing shift work or unsociable work, making sure, that you can get a hot meal at 4 o'clock in the morning, that you can get from your car to the building where you work safely at night, that you have got somewhere that's safe to leave your valuables or to go and catch a nap after a crazy shift. And those things used to be available. Certainly they were there when I was a junior doctor, and we don't have them now.
So that's the clinical bit of it. And then the politics, obviously, because we do health with the political twist.
Indeed.
So the politics of it, I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? I mean, I said to the Prime Minister at said liaison committee this week that he is gaining a reputation for a bit of a problem solver. And, with the nurses, the agenda for change group, basically, of which the nurses are the biggest group, they seem to have reached a settlement, and they're putting that out to the unions to agree it. We'll talk about in a minute about how they pay for that. But with the junior doctors, I mean, we talked about this last time, didn't we, a bit? But I mean, that negotiation with the BMA's Junior Doctors Committee, that's a tougher nut to crack, isn't it? They're a tough bunch.
Well, anyone who works in a trades union is tough. You have to be. You go into anybody going into a negotiation should be doing it with a spirit of going in with a high ask, but knowing what you're prepared to accept and how everyone saves face on a way out. Because at the end of the day, you've got to have an exit strategy before you enter a negotiation. I mean, clearly, you don't go to try and buy a house without knowing what you're really prepared to pay for it. In the same way, you don't go into trades union negotiations. So I think we can't do a disservice to any of our colleagues in the RCN or in the other huge healthcare unions. The difference, I think, with the junior doctors is that they have majored on pay and only on pay in terms of the ask that we're hearing externally. I mean, I know that on the front line, what my junior doctor colleagues need is more than just pay. It's a wraparound supportive structure that touches many parts of their training pathways and the support they get. I really hope that the negotiations that are happening in private, or the discussions that are happening in private, we know they're not in negotiation at the moment, but the discussions are much wider than just the headline figures on pay, because we can't have medical exceptionalism. We can't have doctors seen as somehow different, better or special compared to other healthcare professionals or indeed anyone else in society. We're all human beings. We're all part of a complex civilized society, and we work in an area that's paid for by general taxation. We have to work within those confines.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? So I just on the wider point on pay then, so with respect to the nurses and what have you, I mean, I was asking the Prime Minister about that this week because, I know the Academy are concerned about, and across the NHS, they're concerned about how this is going to be paid for, because it hasn't been set out, it hasn't been defined by ministers. So, if it just comes out of existing budgets, bearing in mind some of that is in year, so in this year, then, efficiencies, no efficiency comes through in a matter of days, does it? But this is what the health secretary said this week. He said this week, nurses, ambulance crews, physiotherapists, and other non-medical NHS staff will begin to vote in trade union ballots on the government's pay offer. Hugely positive. After weeks of talks, this fair and balanced offer recognises the vital role these hardworking NHS staff play while protecting our commitment to halve inflation. I urge union members to accept. I'm working with Treasury to ensure my department has the money it needs to fully fund this pay offer, which will include additional funding and reprioritising existing budgets. This is on top of the existing funding we've already made available for a pay increase of up to 3.5% in 23-24. I want to be clear, there'll be no impact to frontline services or quality of care as a result of this offer. So, that, I guess that's said to reassure the unions as they go to their ballot. But we're still not clear, are we? It seems like there's I mean, the Prime Minister said this week something along the lines of, I'm not going to get in between negotiation between Treasury and the Department of Health. But I mean, I would have thought as First Lord to the Treasury, that's literally what he does. But that is so yeah. There's worry in the NHS, right? The Academy are worried about how it's going to be paid for.
Yeah, we're really worried. I mean, I think that's fair to say, because we know just how stretched frontline services are already. And so there's the in-year bit. Let's be clear, we've got just over 24 hours left of the in-year. 20, and then we're into the new financial year from the weekend. So and so, budgets are closed and finished. I mean, there is no money to pay anything extra. The money's spent and wrapped up. So I don't quite know how that works for the current financial year. For next financial year, soon to be, then they have baked in 3.5%, which is great. You need an extra chunk, a big extra chunk, to make up the difference on these salaries. And I mean, that's not factoring in whatever is settled for the junior doctors. There are still settlements to be made for other doctors. There's the consultants, the specialist doctors, and the GPs. And another thing just to throw into the mix is that the GPs are desperately worried about whatever settlement is made for the nursing and allied healthcare professionals, because the money they had last year didn't include anything extra. GPs often get forgotten, and they expect to just find the money for existing resources, even when the rest of the NHS has existing resource. And that simply means, for a practice of the size of mine, we've got over 100 members of staff. If you start giving pay rises that are unbudgeted of several percent, you're actually talking about reducing headcount or not replacing people when somebody leaves. And that's really scary, because it just means then we can offer less effective services at a time when attitudes and worry is that services really aren't good enough. So we are in a complex pickle. And for me, red lines about what's going on with negotiations are both that money can't come from within existing services and that we can't put patient safety in jeopardy.
Complex pickle. It's very good. Dr. Helen Lampard, complex pickle. Anyway, on the subject of pickles, let's take a quick breather, and then we're going to come back and talk about very much a related subject. So this week, it has been reported public satisfaction with health service drops to record low. So this is Helen, because we have this British Social Attitude Survey, which has been going since 1983. So it's pretty much the gold standard, the public's view of the health service. It says that just 29% of the public said they were satisfied with NHS in 2022. Waiting time, staff shortage is the biggest concern. So that's 7 percentage points down on last year, and a drop from the 2010 high of 70% satisfaction. And if you then look, what's I guess even more worrying about this is that this survey was taken in the autumn, so before the winter months crisis that we had in A&E. And those who said that they're quite or very satisfied, hospital outpatients 45%, inpatient care 35%, general practice, you guys 35%, A&E 30%, poor old dentistry down on just 27%. So this is a worry, right? The public's belief and faith in the NHS is taking a hit. Yes,
I mean, to be honest, this is no surprise to me at all.
This come across in the consulting room? People
absolutely. I think for GPs, last year the biggest drop was in general practice. This year it's the turn of A&E to have the biggest drop, and dentistry has been languishing low for several years. And the reasons, this isn't difficult to work out, is it? We see it on the front head, the headlines of newspapers week in, week out. We see the dissatisfaction with those working within the service wanting to get out or taking industrial action. So we have got a major problem here. And there's some fundamental issues about how much the nation is prepared to invest in its health and care system. And that's a complicated equation. That's something we try and tease out in conversations. There's also about expectations, and we've made a lot of changes, certainly through the pandemic. We've made massive changes in the way we deliver care, whether that's doing more remotely, whether that's offering care, some things online. And we haven't taken patients on that journey with us. We haven't involved them enough in the conversation, so that there are massive swathes of patients who haven't clocked that they can do a lot of stuff online which they could never do before, whether that's via the NHS app or it's online consulting, or that actually they can help in their care in the same way they help with their banking by putting information into the bank so that you have fewer people at the counter so the banks can run more efficiently. The NHS works more efficiently if you put information in to help us. So your regular health checks, your high blood pressure check, please take your blood pressure yourself over the next week or so, give us the readings, and then you don't need a doctor then to help you with the review. One of our other team can help you, and that saves me from doing your blood pressure check, because actually I don't need to do that, and I can spend time with somebody who's got something complicated or more difficult to deal with, and that's about using our resources better.
But can I chuck a devil's advocate in here?
As I do, that's what we're here for.
As I do. So I do wonder, though, you see this. So I'm a constituency MP. I am not short of correspondence from the good people of Winchester and Chandler's-Ford, bless them. When I hear from them about the NHS, sometimes I hear frustrations reporting what they've seen nationally. Sometimes that's politically loaded, let's be honest. But often their experiences of the local health service is anything but negative. It's extremely positive. And I send those anonymized messages sometimes onto the chief executive of the trust, because I know it really gives them a boost. So I just wonder, is this sort of jumped on by those who want to do down the NHS because their agenda is, it's all terrible and it shouldn't be funded by taxpayers and, all that. And is it jumped on by the sort of cynical mind of the British press with their negative mindset, the opposite of the growth mindset that we talk about here with our children? Is it that they've got, I sound like Prince Harry. Oh my God. That's just reminded me. I had a dream about Prince Harry last night.
Should we save your dreams for another time, Steve?
No, but you know what? Prince Harry, right?
Is this safe to broadcast?
Yeah, safe to broadcast. Some of the things he's come out with in his book or whatever. I mean, talking about his brother's Winky. I really don't think he should have gone there. But anyway, look, I sort of felt quite sorry for him in a way. And then I had this dream last night. And this was weird because he was like, how you dream about people who but who are other people. So it was my God, he's going to be embarrassed. It was my brother-in-law and his wife, and his wife was Meghan, and and my brother-in-law was Harry, and they were visiting us as Harry and Meghan, but as my brother-in-law and his wife, and it was quite nice to chat to Harry actually in the dream, and I thought, I feel a bit sorry for you in some ways, and my God, this is a Peter Rabbit Warren that I've gone down here.
And I think as your GP, I should draw you back. And
I feel like I need to share. What was I saying? We were talking about public satisfaction anyway, and the British press. And I just wonder, is this sort of one of those half full stories that they love to jump on, or is there something more here?
So look, I think you've got something here. I'm not going to pick up on the Prince Harry side of things, although apparently he is very good to chat to and reliably informed. But this attitudes thing is a lot of this is about access, about getting to a healthcare professional. Once you get through the door, once you get your appointment and into the system, satisfaction levels are actually very high. Our healthcare professionals in the UK are trained to very high standards. They're almost invariably compassionate, caring people who really want to do their best for individuals. So I mean, it's a nightmare to get an NHS dental appointment. Once you get one, you get great dental care. By and large, when you get through to the door to a GP surgery, that is exactly what I hear day in, day out. And we get some gorgeous messages from patients thanking us for what we do for them. But also the access is a challenge. It is a problem. Just yesterday, my taxi driver was telling me his wife hasn't been very well. And I said, you need to get her seen by the GP or somebody at the surgery. It sounds like she needs some antibiotics. And he said, we tried 98 times this morning. And he showed me his phone where they'd been trying 98 times. And so there are things we can do better. There should be systems of automated callback systems. So you don't need to be sitting there pressing redial 98 times once you try at 8 a.m. in the morning to get in. There should be systems where she should have been told there are other ways and other places to go. There are walk-in centres you can go to get treated for things like potential infections. And so I think, there's a communication piece.
So on the access then, which sort of moves us neatly on to... We're recording this on the 30th of March. See, this is not just thrown together. We're recording this on the 30th of March. I think that imminently, shall we say, shortly, as they used to tell me when I was a minister to say, just say shortly, just say it'll be published shortly. Shortly, the Prime Minister is going to publish his primary care plan.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what exam question it seeks to answer, but I think one of them is that access. It's the 8 a.m. scramble, right? That people hate as times accessing GPs. I know this is a big question, but what would be your 3 big asks of the Rish if you were to ask him for his primary care plan?
You see, I would be asking for a plan that is far more than just about access. But my understanding is that this plan is all about improved access. So let's just focus it down and say, let's say it is a GP access plan, not a fixing GP plan. That I'd be looking for a huge nod to the whole workforce challenges. So what's the plan for improving workforce? Because we just haven't got enough doctors, nurses, and other healthcare professionals in general practice. That's just a fact. There's no ambiguity there. In parallel, we're desperately waiting on an NHS workforce plan. And there's been some toing and froing as to when we're going to get that. Is it going to contain numbers in it? And how, and what's the financial plan for looking to fix that in time? So certainly it's about numbers. There's something about technology and improving the quality of technology, whether that's the telephony, whether that's the systems that we use. I mean, in fairness, we improved our use of technology in general practice more in 10 days than we had in 10 years previously when the pandemic started. But there's so much further to go. Things are still clunky. Use of the NHS app is still variable and so on. So there's technology piece. And I think there's something for me about the communication piece and how we help people work together with their practices better and engage with their practices better. And that's not just about GPs, that's about the whole system. I've got a patient participation group in my practice who are great and bring good ideas all the time. But I think there is a huge untapped potential in the public for engaging and being actively involved in the care and the services that are offered. But it does take a bit of a leap of faith. It takes clinicians and the NHS to trust the public. And it takes people out in the public to step up and offer and be prepared to help in a constructive way, understanding the limitations of the service we've got to deliver.
Yeah. Okay. Well said. Now, you want to talk about nitrous oxide, didn't you?
Yeah. Well, that's been in the news this week, hasn't it? Nitrous oxide. I mean, I don't know. Is this one of those things that hits your mailbox?
Yeah, and not just that. It hits my grabber because I go out in my
Your
constituency.
grabber.
Yeah, I have a grabber.
Tell me what earth is a grabber?
A litter picking grabber.
Oh.
So I go out with the Winchester litter pickers every so often, and in the city centre, and I with a big bag, with a big black bag, and you'd be amazed how quickly you fill a big black bag of litter. Anyway, and when I started doing it, I would just see these little silver canisters that look like a kind of, like the oxygen, people who don't know, like the oxygen tank that divers have on their back. It's like a mini version, a mini-me version of them. Yeah. And you just find these all over. And what they are is nitrous oxide canisters, and it is colloquially called laughing gas. It annoys me, the title, because I don't think there's anything funny about it, especially when you've got teenage children and people take it to get high. Sort of part of the, what can we do to get high? So basically, the government announced this week on Monday an antisocial behaviour plan. The Prime Minister announced it. It was everywhere. I was actually in Downing Street on Tuesday for an antisocial behaviour roundtable, which was incredibly sociable, and with cups of tea. Everyone was very well behaved. But there's lots to this wider plan, which we won't go into now. But yeah, they're going to introduce a criminal offence of possessing these nitrous oxide canisters, because you do find them in playgrounds and parks where little kids are, and they pick them up and they wonder what they are, and this is not good. Have you ever come across this stuff in medicine?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, from the social and the littering side of it, nearly broke my ankle standing on one not so long ago. And certainly, we live in a really lovely rural area, but you do find them at the edges of footpaths, where you can see where kids have obviously clustered to get together and use them, and they always seem to use high volumes of them, and that's the thing. You see loads of them. You don't normally find one or two. There's like a nest of them. So
what do they do? Because it sort of said that they sort of intoxicating, can damage young brains and nervous systems. Is that what they do?
Yes. So they're a drug of abuse, and they're most commonly used by people aged 16 to 24. They're one of the commonest drugs at that age that they're used. And so if you use it, as you said, you sort of get a euphoria, you get a high, you get giggles, and it's very short-lived. It's actually only, if you take a breath, it's only 30 to 60 seconds you get this effect for, which is why they have to keep using them, and they use such large volumes of it. But actually, nitrous oxide is a really useful medical gas. It's been used combined with oxygen for dental procedures and medical procedures for, decades, many decades, I think possibly longer than that. And there are loads of legitimate commercial uses of it. It's used in food additives, as far as I understand. I think it's also used as propellant and an additive in fuel. So we're not talking about a substance that should be banned. We're not talking about a legitimate substance that has been abused. But there are some serious harms beyond the intoxication, because obviously when you have a high or you're intoxicated, you can do stupid things and injure yourself and others. But there's also longer-term effects because it leads to deficiencies of vitamin B12, and there's loads of other potential harms. But there is some controversy about high, about how far it can go. There's talk about nerve damage or paralysis and so on. I've certainly never come across that clinically as a GP. But, I do wonder myself with some of the kids who I get brought in with mental health difficulties and challenges, if this is something I haven't explicitly asked about. We always gently ask about illicit drug use, but hasn't been illicit drug use, but will become so very soon. I certainly think we need to increase the awareness of the dangers of it. And I know there's a move to bring it into the school curriculum as part of those education courses that children have about the harms of all sorts of addictive substances and alcohol and inappropriate sexual behaviors. So, yeah, it's good one to raise. Good to raise.
Yeah, well, I mean, when they sort of did this, the government said that they were concerned about the rise in health and social harms, particularly to young people. So, we are prevention being the new cure. Well,
absolutely.
If this is part of that, then all's the good. But as ever with policy, and that's our job in Parliament, of course, is to scrutinise the unintended consequence, because you've obviously outlined some of the sensible ways that it's used.
Can I remind people of the brilliant resource, which is a government resource called Talk to Frank, which is an online or a telephone helpline with really good, straightforward, accessible advice about all sorts of illicit drugs and abuse. And they definitely include nitrous oxide in there. Other names for nitrous oxide, NOS, NOS, or balloons is another term I've heard that called it. So, yeah. Anyway.
Talk to Frank. Yes,
we
do. Our babysitter's called
TalkToFrank.com.
We do talk to Frank. Quite a lot, actually. My son enjoys playing Nerf gun wars with Frank.
Oh, anyway, is Nerf great?
I digress. Anyway, let's take a quick break. Welcome back. You know what it's time for, Helen? It's time for this.
Oh, that's my favourite doorbell.
I know. That means the pod surgery is open. Open. Helen, what do you got?
I think we should talk about alcohol today, moving from nitrous oxide onto alcohol and the harms.
Who's written to us about that then?
We've had a flurry of people, and I can't find my bit of paper with the name on them. Have you got the name? Somebody's definitely. I think several people have written to us about it over the last few weeks. We've talked about lots of other things that are bad for us, but alcohol is one of those things that is socially acceptable, but also very dangerous from a medical point of view. And I can't be a hypocrite here. I like a drink like the next person does. But the number of people I've seen over the years as patients, clearly there's people who are severely addicted and whose lives are completely destroyed by alcohol. But for me, one of the biggest groups in the worrying group are what I call the high-functioning alcoholics. So that's not an official term, that's a Helenism. But these are people who really are highly dependent on alcohol, but managed to restrict it to evenings and weekends. So, they go to work, they hold down often very responsible jobs, and then they come home and the first thing they do, they get in straight to the kitchen, get a glass or a bottle or a can. And it's that dependency and that urgency. And the problem with that is that it insidiously gets worse. And then it leads to domestic challenge, which then in turn goes on to, affecting work. And once you start to get to that, it can be a house of cards. It just falls down pretty fast. So, and loads of medical harms, of course, of alcohol. I'm sure you come across this in your world.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the Alcohol Health Alliance are quite good in this space. I mean, some of the figures that I've sort of seen from them, it's the biggest risk factor for early mortality, for ill health, disability among 15 to 49-year-olds. It plays a casual role in more than 200 different diseases and injuries. It's linked to at least 7 cancers, including
at least I think it's more than that. Yeah,
including 2 of the most common, which is obviously breast and bowel. Yeah. I've just been reading a book actually by my good friend Adrian Childs, who on 5 Live and does various other things. It's called The Good Drinker, how I learned to love drinking less. And what he talks about is normalized drinking. He grew up in a society, in a family where it was just what you did. And then, when you got to be a teenager, you tried to get hold of drink. And then when you were able to legally drink, it was what you did because it's what had been done before you. And it's just a really moving book, actually. It's called The Good Drinker by Adrian Childs. And he talks about his journey and how he learned to love drinking less. And I just would say that, I'm not a big drinker. I don't particularly enjoy it. I enjoy it sometimes, but in moderation. But I can see how for some people it becomes a crutch, and then it becomes a problem, and then you see the impact of it. I mean, how often do you have a conversation in your surgery with somebody about their alcohol intake?
Every day.
Every day.
I mean, we touch on it in many consultations quite regularly, but every day I am speaking to somebody and realizing and teasing out that alcohol is a problem part of their life. I mean, this is a massive issue. 1 in 10 A&E visits directly related to alcohol harms. One thing we see, impact of unsafe sex, lowering your inhibitions, more likely to have unsafe sex. And the consequences of that are massive. I mean, you've talked about cancers. It weakens your whole immune system. So it makes you as well as more prone to a massive range of cancers. And the way I describe it is you put the alcohol in your mouth, it comes out the other end. Everywhere it touches in between is increased risk of cancer, as well as breast cancers and damaging your brain as well. So, association with depression, dementia, can lead to all sorts of issues with impotence and premature ejaculation and so on. So there's loads of stuff. It's bad.
Yeah.
So my way of framing it, I don't know if you think this is helpful, but is if you need a drink, you got to stop and think. So if you need a drink, not have a drink. If you need a drink, is why do you need a drink? Are you just thirsty? If you're just thirsty, get some water, get some juice, get a cup of tea. Are you stressed? If you're stressed, there are far better ways of dealing with your stress than reaching for the bottle. And whether that's exercise, whether that's talking to somebody, whether that's tackling the root causes and changing your life around. But the alcohol doesn't solve anything. It's merely a short-term hiding place. And I think, and is this just becoming habit? It's just because of what I always do when I get at home in the evening. And if you think any of those things are an issue, then get help now. Yeah. Start talking to people, because there's tons of help out there if you're interested.
The question actually came from an organisation called Balance Northeast, who work to reduce alcohol harm in the Northeast, and they're sort of calling for a national alcohol strategy.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
They're talking for awareness. I think their exact message is why is there no awareness raising campaigns? Yeah. We have effective TV adverts and online adverts around Be Clear on Cancer, for instance, and this is obviously a driver of ill health in many ways. The figure I've got here is that the annual cost of alcohol to the NHS, to NHS England, was last estimated to be about £3.5 billion a year.
Yeah, well,
so
that's
probably a decade old, that figure. So I would imagine that it's probably gone up significantly. And who knows how COVID helped or didn't help in that respect. So when we're talking about prevention of ill health, so the addictions, and something the Select Committee is going to be looking at in its prevention inquiry is the addictions. We're going to have a work stream called addictions. So that will contain your smoking, your alcohol, your drugs, and they are, in some ways, they're low hanging fruit, but they're very hard to break, and we have to treat it as I'm hosting an event actually in Parliament in the next few months on behalf of the AA. Who I think
Alcoholics Anonymous, not the Automobile Association.
Exactly. Other motor organisations are available. And I think it is an illness, and I think we need to treat it that way. Far too often it ends up in the criminal justice system, doesn't it?
Can I give a plug for another brilliant alcohol-related charity who are associated with Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's Al-Anon, who are the parallel charity who support the family and friends and carers of those with addiction. They're absolutely brilliant, and I've seen them help so many of my patients and their loved ones. Because they help people realize that what you have to do is apply tough love. If you've got somebody you love and care for who's got an alcohol problem, you have to be tough with them in terms of helping them come to terms and deal with the problem. If they don't own the problem, want to do it themselves, you can't do it for them. Anyway.
Okay. Well, look, we're going to close. Obviously, Easter is coming, so happy Easter. We will return. We will return with the pod after Easter, and on the subject of everything in moderation. Let's presumably the doctor Helenism is the moderation on chocolate.
Yes, absolutely. For me, I'd go for quality over quantity any day.
Definitely. What sort of Easter egg are you looking for this year?
Oh, see, I try and be disciplined, and I say don't get me an Easter egg, but a little tasty little bit of hotel chocolate goes down very nicely. But I'm married to a man for whom it's got to be Cadbury's every time, and I do live in the Midlands. Cadbury's isn't that far away.
I'm looking for the cream egg one this year. When my son was little, he thought that the big egg was full of the Cadbury's cream egg cream, and that would not be that wouldn't, and in fact he asked for that egg for that very reason, and then when there was smaller eggs inside it, he was slightly disappointed. But that would not be moderation. But seeing as Monty, my 3-year-old black lab, is laying literally across my feet as we're recording the pod this week, so welcome Monty to the pod.
Hey, Monty, that's a good boy.
But let's not have the pod pet surgery open this Easter, because you know what they're like. They see this shiny paper and they think, hey, dogs and chocolate, this is for me. And chocolate is, of course, poison to doggies.
Yes, please keep your Easter eggs well away from your pets, because definitely that is not something any of us want. Emergency vet bills are not the extra expense
No, really
you need
not
this
fun.
Easter.
Yeah. Anyway, look, it's been fun. We will be back after Easter when the pod continues. So thanks very much, Helen. Lovely to
Thanks,
see
Dave.
you. God
Stay
bless.
safe.
Bye
Bye.
for now.